And if this is your first time giving your mind a little love, I have a few goodies for you. First, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And second, sign up for the Morning Mind Love. Think of it like a weekday oracle from your highest self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, you'll get 2 gifts absolutely free: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up. Welcome to Mind Love, episode 301. Today's episode is all about functional imagery training, how to go beyond visualization to make your mind crave your dreams and goals.
It's the thoughts that we elaborate on that shape our behavior. So this whole body of research grew out of the research in cravings. Really well-intentioned people would set out to give something up, and then they'd hear something or smell something or drive by a place where they used to do something, and suddenly their mind is hijacked by a craving. And cravings are sensory-based. So what they set out to do is, could we teach humans to crave basically what they want? Can we use the science of craving for an old habit? Can we use it for a new habit, for a desired habit, for a goal? So if you elaborate on something with imagery, you're going to be more likely to act on it.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. What if you could make your mind crave anything? What if, instead of having that incessant inner voice telling you to go back to the fridge and overindulge in your favorite snack, you use that same mind power to feel almost addicted to your wildest dreams? What if, instead of talking yourself out of those big goals you have, your mind was constantly talking you into them? What would you be willing to do? What leaps would you be willing to take? What would you finally accomplish? Ironically, anyone with an addiction knows the power of their mind. When I was in the depths of my struggle with bulimia, that next binge was all I could think about. I felt helpless to my impulses. One minute I would be vowing to myself that today would be the day I started to get better. And the next, I'd be in the dessert aisle with enough sweets to feed a party of 10. I remember feeling like I was stuck in my body with someone else controlling my behaviors. Looking back, as helpless as I felt, it actually taught me the power of my mind. When my mind really fixated on something, there was nothing that could stop me from moving in that direction, from taking the actions to satiate whatever it was that my mind was craving. And I don't mean to make light of addictions. Believe me, that was one of the darkest periods of my life. But it does make you wonder, what if you could get your mind to crave something positive just as intensely as many of you know it can steer us toward the negative? Addiction itself is just a process in the brain. What starts out as a choice or a voluntary behavior can quickly become an uncontrollable habit that consumes your time, energy, and resources. It alters your thought patterns, your emotional responses, your decision-making abilities. And before you know it, you feel like you just can't stop. A lot of people think that it's the chemicals in drugs or food that makes them addictive. And while that's kind of the case, it's also our brain's response to these things that creates the addiction. It's the surge of dopamine that our brain releases that we're addicted to. That's why we can get addicted to non-chemical behaviors like gambling or social media. So what if you could hack this system and make your mind crave something positive, like your biggest life goals? What if you could make it not only easy, but almost addictive to make progress toward your dreams? What if you just couldn't help but spend each day moving yourself toward the person that you really want to be, or the life that you've always dreamed you could have? Well, that's what we're learning to do today. Our guest is Joanna Grover. She's an executive coach with 19 years of experience as a cognitive behavioral therapist. She first encountered functional imagery training when it helped her recover from a horse riding accident. After witnessing firsthand the effectiveness of this strategy in a client's weight loss journey, she felt even more committed to the work. She then became the very first person in the US to be certified in FIT, and she's also the co-author of The Choice Point. So 3 key things we will learn are how your mental hurdles are self-imposed and how to overcome them, how to connect your goals to a bigger picture to create internal motivation, and the power of multisensory imagery to make our mind crave anything. I used to be one of those people who had grand plans for a big healthy meal every Sunday night, and I'd make these elaborate meal plans, buy all the ingredients, and then Wednesday would roll around and I'd be staring at that wilted spinach, ordering takeout again. Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, and that's why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's so perfect for those nights when you have no energy left. What I love most is their smart cart technology. It actually learns what I like and what I will actually cook. So no more buying ingredients for recipes that I'll never make. Everything that shows up, I actually use. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners, only high quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry brands like Vital Farms and Ithaca Hummus that I already trust. The time I've gotten back has been incredible. Instead of spending Sunday meal planning, I'm doing things that actually matter to me. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code mindlove. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove, to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code mindlove.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
And now let's welcome Joanna Grover to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me, Melissa.
So what inspired your recent book on functional imagery training?
It was a long journey there. I spent the first part of my career as a cognitive therapist, mostly treating anxiety, and my specialty was panic attacks. I saw a lot of suffering. I was really looking for something. I was always on the look for tools that could help people. And when I found this particular tool that we talk about in the book, I was the first person trained in it in the US, and I thought, I want to bring this to the world, because it had been sort of housed in academia. So I was really inspired. I guess you could say I was inspired to help alleviate suffering.
So let's start with the basics. How is our mental imagery created, and what exactly does it entail? Because I know a lot of people, when they think of mental imagery, they think of just the visuals that pop into their mind, but it seems to be so much more than that.
It is. We use imagery all day long, but we don't really know how to harness it to get us closer to what we want. Most of us tend to focus on negative things, and then there's negative imagery, and then it has sort of a spiraling effect. But yes, when we use imagery, we use 7 senses. So it's the 5 that it's sound, smell, touch, taste, vision. And then we add emotion and motion.
So emotion and motion, I can kind of grasp the emotional part of it, but what's the motion part?
So the motion is being able to feel your body moving in space, right? So to be able to imagine if you're a golfer, swinging the club without actually swinging it. Can you feel the motion? Can you feel your body in motion without being in motion?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like what you're doing. Is the visual moving or is it static? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And so emotion drives human behavior, and imagery is very emotional. So when we have people use this technique, and I'd love to give you a test drive in a moment, because a friend of ours, and we actually start the book this way, he said, "Don't tell me you're a comedian, tell me a joke." So I feel like it's sort of like, don't tell me what you do, just do it. Right. So I'm happy to show you what imagery is.
Yeah, I would love that. The first thought that comes into mind is that's what I always say to my son. I'm always like, show me. So in my mind, I just heard his little voice go, show me. I'm ready though.
Okay, great. I just want you to take a deep breath and exhale, relax your shoulders and perhaps feel your feet on the ground. And imagine that you're walking on a beach. You're on vacation. You notice the texture of the sand, noticing the color. You breathe in and smell. What sounds do you hear?
Seagulls,
Hmm.
ocean waves,
Mm-hmm.
a
So
light
you walk to the
breeze.
edge of the water and you decide you're going to run in. So you run and you jump into the surf, and the water temperature is 50 degrees. So that's an imagery experience. It's what we call a primer. I'm curious to know what you experienced.
It was very calming in the beginning. And then when I knew I was going to jump in the ocean, because I've lived by the ocean and I've had these exact moments, I could almost feel myself bracing. And then I imagined myself running in, and I could almost feel like that pressure around my heart space, like I I feel when I am extremely cold.
Hmm. And was there emotion that you associate with that, with being cold and being in the sea?
Hesitancy.
Mhm, mhm.
I've done the cold plunges and things like that, and my husband used to do it every January 1st, and I just couldn't hang. So I could already feel, I'm like, this is just a visual. Why am I already stopping myself?
So this is what we call a primer, and it's the only time that we guide someone through imagery. It's just to experience how powerful it is, right? You had a physical reaction to just putting yourself in a time and a place and tapping into your senses, your memory of what that's like. And then we always throw in a little twist at the end, either, someone's walking in the woods and they walk through a spider web or they jump in a cold pool, just to really have you feel that, right? And then after you get it, then we teach you how to use it. And we don't guide, we just train. Because in our research, and the research from my co-author, Dr. Jonathan Rhodes, we always say he's the scientist, he's the head, and I'm the heart. I'm a therapist, but I'm also a storyteller. I love the art of story. Anyway, when you get good at tapping into using multisensory, so the trick is to use 3 or more, then it really seems to shape your future, shape human behavior. It's really fascinating.
And so is that the main difference of functional imagery training versus, I mean, I'm sure so many people on this show have talked about visualizations or the law of attraction and how visualizations play into that. What is the difference with the functional imagery training?
Yeah, great question. So, functional imagery training, again, it's an academic field of study. It's 2 decades old, and from the University of Plymouth. Jonathan Rhodes is one of the developers. And the difference is in functional imagery training, there is something we call motivational interviewing, which is basically a style of asking questions and listening, almost like a sacred listening and supporting someone so they can really get to their values and what their goals are. And then we combine that with teaching imagery as a habit, putting yourself in the future and making choices. Our book is called The Choice Point. So that when you get to, let's say, the refrigerator door and you're about to open it, you can use your imagery of the feel of the door handle, the temperature, the way it opens, and you use that imagery to go into what do you want? Whether if you want to be healthy, or you're going to reach for the apple or something else. So in these moments, in these choice points, you can use that to override the status quo.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know the title of your book is called The Choice Point. So I want to sit in this area for a minute. What exactly is the choice point? Is it just at any moment where your choice can basically lead you in one direction of life or the other?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, most of us are on autopilot. We say we want to do something, like we do value we ask a lot of questions about personal values. And the number one value people say is their health. But yet each day when we face choices, whether we stay in bed or we get up and exercise, we usually opt for like the easier one. So that's a choice point. Or do you pick up your phone and start scrolling, or do you get up and meditate? These are all choice points. We face many of them in a day, and knowing that you can use these in moments toward a specific goal, it turns out it's 5 times more effective than just talking about a goal.
I've heard so many different things about goals. Certain people say when you talk about your goal, it actually decreases your motivation, and other people say it makes you more likely to follow through with it. But I guess if we have an option that's just better than talking about it altogether, we don't have to reconcile which of those is better.
Yeah, and I think the way we do it using the motivational interviewing, it really is it is a space where someone's supported, where they explore. A lot of times we'll announce a goal maybe and not really think it through, or we feel like a pressure and external. There's some external pressure on us, and then we don't feel that sense of agency, like it's our choice. So there's so many complications in doing it. But we find that if people start with like a small tangible goal and they start to use this, and then they realize it's effective. Like when we start with a lot of people, we start with their hobby. What do they want to get better at? It might be swimming, it might be tennis. And then they're like more willing to play around with it, because the imagination and imagery is very playful, really.
Yeah, I love that. And I have used motivational interviewing in my coaching practice. The first time I had ever encountered it was, we didn't call it that, but I was a suicide and crisis counselor in my early 20s. And when we did training for it, I remember kind of being blown away, because everything I thought would be the right thing to say was not exactly the best thing to say to somebody who was calling in crisis. And it was the same idea of getting them to come to their own conclusions. But what we learned in that training was that in those cases, these aren't people that are necessarily wanting to accomplish a goal, but just wanting to make it another day, wanting to not feel so out of control in their life. But we use the exact same steps of asking them questions to get them to come to their own conclusions, to remind them of times that they felt empowered before. Because if we gave that to them and said like, well, I've felt like you, and here's how I dealt with it, their thought would be more likely, well, how come everyone else can handle it and I can't? Or, oh, it's so easy for her, it feels impossible for me. And it actually disempowers them when you give them the answers.
Yes.
And so
I love that you are trained in this.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what I was actually being trained into until I started coaching. And then I was like, wow, this is actually the best way to help anybody do anything, really. Because even as a mother right now, any new mom out there, I now just had my second baby, but it just seems like when your kids are young, people love to give suggestions the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And as any sitcom will tell you, mothers never like it. So, but it's the same thing where it's just unrequested advice, just for some reason develops a natural resistance regardless of what the area is.
Yeah, the truth is most of us don't want to be told what to do. We'll go in the other direction, especially, so I have 2 kids and they're, young adults now, but especially in the teenage years. Like I would suggest every parent out there get trained in MI, because it really is a beautiful way of, I do believe that people want to do the right thing and they want to sort of better themselves. But if it's being imposed on them, it's a totally different experience. And you're going to run out of fuel, right? So we find that when you combine MI, which you got to experience, is powerful. When we combine that with someone being in their imagination to rehearse the future so that they can stay in alignment, then that's like rocket fuel.
And so where do you begin with this? Because I know one of the first steps is helping people choose according to their values and not their impulses. Tell us about that.
Again, people often list values that are health, family is usually number two. But then you ask them to tell you what their average day is like, or what, how open their calendar and you have a look at what they're doing. And those values aren't reflected. It's a deep dive into we give them a big list of values and they have to decide one by one what's in their top 3 or top 5, and then how their goal, whatever their goal is, relates to their value. So when people do this, there's an emotional and a bigger picture connection to their goal. It's not just, oh, I have to, whatever it is, lose weight, or oh, I have to stop getting so angry. It's tied to a value of the kind of person they want to be, the kind of life they want to have. And again, it gives them that sense of being in the driver's seat. It's not being imposed on them. It's coming from an internal drive.
I know that 2 of my top values are health, but a big one that seems to come through all of my decisions with the life I've created now, the things I've been resistant to in the past, the things I've fought against, it all comes back to freedom for me.
Mm-hmm.
And a big goal of mine is actually to write a book. And so I've been trying to figure out where those values, what intertwines with that. Because I know, yes, as an author, that would create even more freedom in my lifestyle in different ways. But there's also another one that I just can't figure out a name for. I just feel like it's so important to share stories. It's been a huge part of my healing process, and it's also a huge part of how I help other people.
Mm-hmm.
What value do you think that would come back to?
Well, I think sometimes it's linked to more than one, right? There definitely is freedom, right? You give up freedom at first when you're writing the book. For 6 months, I didn't go out weekends or evenings. It was just heads down. We were on a deadline to write this book. So you're giving up freedom initially. So it's that bigger picture. But you also probably have a value of compassion, helping. So if you can tie in, it's going to give you freedom, but you'll also be of service.
And so when you're helping people, how important is it to get really clear on what these values are? Because just like the example I gave, I feel like a lot of people are living that way. They don't necessarily know the exact words for their values. It might pop up every now and then and they feel something, but until I actually sat down and did a values exercise, I wasn't really sure that freedom was one of my number one driving points. And so how do you instruct people to get clear on that?
Well, we do it either, we use a value card sort. We use that in individuals. We use it in teams. It's really interesting to see a team that works together negotiate values and what's going to be in the top 5 values. So it's really conversation. And then we ask things like, well, what if these 2 values rub up against one another? What if they're in conflict? What will you do? So anticipating how you're going to handle when difficulty arises. I often think that when 2 values are in conflict with one another, we experience an emotion like guilt that we don't want to feel. And then maybe we default back to baseline behavior. But if you can really explore it and be clear on what you want, that's important. And sometimes people come in for one thing and then they start talking about it and they're like, you know what, that's really not what I want. I really haven't sat down to ask myself in the presence of another these questions.
One of my favorite exercises is Dean Gracioso's 7 Levels Deep. And that's because, just as you said, so often I think I want something. And if I sit there and suss it out and really go deeper, well, why do I want that? Why do I want that? Why is that important? It comes down to this baseline need of security and safety, or maybe who I want to be versus just wanting a house or wanting to write a book or whatever the first thought is. And so I know for me, a lot of times, that's come out through my own internal conversation with some of these structures that people have created to sort of help bring it out. And you mentioned earlier how we're so often on autopilot. And so we're just kind of choosing and we're not even really realizing how many choice points we're hitting during the day. And so it's just kind of funny to think, where as so many people have trouble following through on goals or getting or creating a life that makes them happy. And it's like, well, so many of us don't know what we want. We don't know how to get there, and we don't even see all the choices that we have throughout the day.
Yeah, no, there are so many levels to it, right? Like there's being clear on what you want, and then being prepared for the struggle and the things you're going to have to give up, including the story you tell yourself about yourself. So, it's, again, there's conversations about this, but then we teach imagery as like, you have ways that you rehearse, like in the morning, we kind of habit stack. So maybe when you're brushing your teeth or the tea kettle's on or the coffee is brewing, that you spend, it could be 30 seconds, it could be 3 minutes, just reviewing what's one thing I can do today to get me closer to my goal. Or how will I handle this difficult conversation and stay with my values? And you use your senses to be in that experience before it happens. So there's the habit of imagery, so that every day there's a consistency to it. And then we use cues, like athletes use cues to reset their mind, right? And get their head back in the game. So people have cues. So one of my cues is the moment my feet touch the ground in the morning, I go through my imagery. Like what's one thing I can do today?
That sounds like it's combining different models of habit formation that people like James Clear and BJ Fogg talk about, where you have a cue, and once you choose that cue, you can use it to start a habit. You can even stack multiple habits, like brushing your teeth and doing push-ups or whatever it is.
Right. It's funny you say that. I've started doing push-ups. I had a really bad equestrian accident, and so I broke my shoulder, and I'm supposed to do push-ups. So yeah, I have to develop a cue for that one.
Well, this is your sign.
Thank you for the reminder.
For me, I have found that for a long time, I would find myself not doing the things I would really want to do. And what it came down to was not understanding how my mind actually worked. And the more I understand, oh, well, this is how a habit's created, or this is how a neural pathway is created, whatever, then it doesn't feel so personal. It's not like, oh, you just can't do this. It's like, no, you're not working with your brain the way it works. So here's how to do it. And
exactly. And understanding that you're, as a friend of mine said, she said, you know what you taught me? I said, what's that? And she said, you taught me my mind is not on my team, right? So the average person has, around 60,000 thoughts a day, and the majority of them are negative, right? And we're not even conscious of the vast majority of them. And then 95% of them are the same as the day before. So if we understand that it's normal to have a negative reaction, it's normal to struggle with creating consistency with a new habit, then we're going to not beat ourselves up. We also teach, self-compassion. That's part of we can often set out on a goal, and then we'll have a bad day and we'll regress, and then we'll beat ourselves up and, just sort of throw our hands up in the air. So we have people anticipate that. What will you do if you have a rough day? How will you handle that? And how will you handle it compassionately, as though you're talking to a friend?
I call this my oh shit plan. and I always have one, because that's the thing. Something comes up and my mind will say, well, it's just this one time because this happened and you couldn't have expected this. But instead, I just have my default plan. Okay, well, if I wake up late, or if my baby needs to be fed during that sacred start morning routine that I always have planned, then what do? Do I not do it at all? No, I do it at 3 p.m. and I clear it for that. And so then I always have this fallback plan. But tell us, what is a thought worm?
Yeah, so a thought worm is it's just a spontaneous thought that comes into your head. And we have them all day long. Or a ding goes off on your phone, and then you think of somebody you didn't call, so these are just spontaneous. The theory of functional imagery training is if we're in a passenger seat, these thought worms can distract us. We go down this hole or that hole. But when we realize that it's the ones that we elaborate on that shape our behavior, right? So it's the thoughts and the imagery that you elaborate on are the ones that will shape your behavior. So for example, so this whole body of research grew out of the research in cravings. Like really well-intentioned people would set out to give something up, and then they'd hear something or smell something or drive by a place where they used to do something, and suddenly their mind is hijacked by a craving. And cravings are sensory based. So what they set out to do is, could we teach humans to crave basically what they want? Can we use the science of craving for an old habit? Can we use it for a new habit, for a desired habit, for a goal? And that's, so if you elaborate on something with imagery, you're going to be more likely to act on it.
My best friend and I were just talking yesterday about cravings, actually. And I used to struggle with bulimia. And so I know that spiral so intimately, where all of a sudden I'd have the thought, and then it didn't even matter if there was a guy I was interested in or what. All of a sudden I knew I was going to binge and purge that night. I'd be planning my grocery store run, what I was going to get, like the whole thing. And before I knew it, it felt impossible to say no. Well, my best friend and I were talking about, a little less extreme versions of that. But when I had a baby 2 months ago, and during the pregnancy, I allowed myself to have way more sugar than I usually do, just because I'm like, if I'm craving it, maybe baby needs it. And so now I am struggling with not having like 4 tablespoons of honey in various places in the morning. And so what my point is my friend was dealing with something very similar, just the sugar cravings and how strong they can be, to where, then all of a sudden you're thinking about cake and you're thinking about this. And so give us an example of, how would you reroute that to start to transform this thought worm that our mind is automatically going down, to steer it towards something that actually aligns with what our overall goal is?
Sure. So that's a great example. And so what we do, obviously, we would have had like a conversation around, understanding you and your goals and what you want. And then, and it's really common that people, like, snacking is a big thing, or certain cravings, certain thought worms come in, like, oh, I'd really like that chocolate biscuit. And so you simply allow it, like, you don't resist it, but you notice it, sort of like with a little bit of mindfulness. And then you choose whether you're in the middle of writing, because you're sitting there writing your book, you take a deep breath and you go into imagery mode. What's it going to feel like? What's that freedom going to feel like? What's it going to feel like when you hand that book to somebody who really needs it, who's going to be touched by your story? And suddenly the desire for a chocolate biscuit is gone.
Wow. So I assumed that you would be rerouting it to like an apple instead, but it sounds like we can just reroute the thoughts in any direction at all.
Again, it has to come from intrinsic motivation, and that's your values, right? What's that going to feel like when you do that thing that you have really wanted to do? And one of the ways that the mind, where the rubber hits the road, is we use something called mental contrasting. And that's when I first studied this work, I was like, oh, this is the hardest part to practice, because I'm going to ask you, what is it like if you don't write that book? So you set a goal that you want to write this book in X amount of time, but other things have gotten in the way. And what's that like?
I feel a pit in my stomach, like failed potential, because I know myself. And when I put things off, I don't often swap it with another behavior that goes towards a different goal. It's like, well, if I'm already slacking, I'm going to slack hard, and it'll be like Netflix binges or something.
Yeah,
and
you're not alone.
Yeah. And so I know that if I'm putting this off, something that I really want to do, and it just keeps increasing every year, then I've probably filled that time with so much wasted space. And especially now that I have kids, I'm just noticing how fast time flies, and
Mhm.
it's almost scary. It's like, wow, pretty soon this will all be over and I'm just going to want this time back. And you spend all this time resisting the present moment.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so
basically, it doesn't feel good.
it's so good, right? There's a pit and there's this emotion that I don't know if you want to tie an emotion to it, but
It feels like grief.
yeah. Oh, it's very powerful. And then, and if we were really in a session, I would take time to let you stay here a little bit. Like, what's that smell like? You know, is there a taste? How does that feel with the people you're interacting with? And how do you talk to yourself? And, you know, really putting you in that future where you don't reach your goal. And then we contrast that to, okay, let's come back to the room, take a deep breath. And now we're going to put you in the future where you do accomplish your goal. It hasn't been easy, been some tough moments, but you've stuck it out and you have accomplished what you set out to do. And just really breathe that in.
Yeah, it feels light and I feel proud. And
Hmm.
not, and the interesting thing is it's not even just proud of myself. I feel proud of what I get to model for my children.
Hmm.
Oh, I feel like I'm going to cry. Wow, this is powerful.
It is powerful. And it's something you're going to remember when you come to a choice point, because the truth is you get to choose.
So, what have you found with the people that have had the most success with this in creating a daily imagery practice? Is it always going towards like the single goal? What if somebody doesn't necessarily have a goal, like writing a book?
Mhm.
Can they still use a daily imagery practice?
Really. I mean, I'll just tell you and all your 90,000 listeners, I hate the word goal. I'm like a very resistant, maybe it was all the years of like, you know, very disciplined school I went to. But I like goal to me, and I'm not alone in this, feels rather oppressive. Like, oh my God, here's this mountain I have to climb. And everyone's different with it, right? So for me, it does help now when I can look at a goal tied to my values, tied to the life that I want to live, and not tied to some like major homework assignment. But then it can apply to relationships, right? It can apply to like, what kind of parent do you want to be? When I walked a client through, and she was an executive at a big bank, and she had some real struggle with just losing her temper. When we walked through this experience of, and she, like you, had young kids, what's it like if this continues and her kids see this? What's that like for her? And can she see it through the eyes of her child? Right. And that's deeply emotional. And then you contrast it with who do you want to be? Like, how do you want to show up? So it doesn't have to be a goal like my neighbor right now is climbing Mount Everest and I'm watching the crew team. I live right next door to the Miami Beach crew team. I'm watching them launch their boats. So it may not be, I want to win a race, I want to climb a mountain. It may just be, I want to be a better mom, you know, and that's not a small thing, or I want to be a different kind of partner, or I want to be a different kind of friend, or I want to be a friend to myself. Like it can be anything. The cool thing is it works with everybody. I find that we've found in the work that like some people really struggle with visualizing, right? And even the word visualizing makes them feel like they're falling short with something. So, you know, we tap into the senses that they are able to experience, and then we help them build that visual muscle. It's a muscle like anything else. And I've honestly, you know, I've not had anyone who didn't get it. Sometimes it takes 4 sessions, sometimes it takes 6, sometimes 10, but everyone gets something out of it. And it's simply the idea that like, wow, I can change the channel in my mind and I can get better at this. So I'm not handing the keys to my life over to like an emotional reaction or to, you know, being an autopilot.
I had a shift while you were talking because I have been thinking about this book and it just feels like such a like a mountain to climb basically, and it's like, man, that it's going to take so long, and so it makes it really easy to put off. But in thinking about who do I want to be today, and it's like, okay, so say I'm visualizing at the end of that goal, who will I be? Well, I'll be a writer. And it's
Mm.
like, are you only a writer when the book's finished? Or are you a writer the moment that you make the choice to start writing? And in that moment, then it's just like immediately after the choice point, you get the reward that you're seeking. You're like, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to be a writer. And so if I look at it that way, then all of a sudden it isn't this mountain to climb. It's just one step to take.
That's right. That you got it exactly. But it's your narrative. Like your narrative initially was, I'll be a writer when I publish a book. No, you're a writer when you're writing. Yeah.
You talked about how people have a hard time visualizing. And I can visualize. And for some reason, it is also so easy for me to be distracted in the middle of it, to where I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down to visualize. And I'll even be sitting down for a full 20-minute meditation. So it's not like I'm getting up and going and doing something else. But I'll be like, I'm going to use this meditation to visualize. And I will start, and it probably lasts 30 seconds, and then I lose it. And so how do you teach people to build that muscle and push past the moment when they want to quit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, 30 seconds is fine. Like if you're an athlete and you're in the heat of the game, you have seconds to reset sometimes. So it's not a matter of like, you have to do it for 20 minutes. You have to do it for like 3 seconds is fine. 30 seconds is fine. And it's like anything else. The more you practice it, and again, we suggest people start small, but then, the more they practice it, the better they get at it. So usually those mental hurdles, they're all like self-imposed for the most part. And once you realize that, like, for example, Jonathan, my co-author, he's worked with the British Commandos, and they're like our Navy SEALs. And they have this horrific training where they like carrying all this weight. They're alone at night, and there are these divots in the moors that some of them have snakes, can break your ankle. And they're told that they have to get to a certain destination. But the entire time, or at certain points in the journey, there's someone alongside of them telling them to quit, and that at any time they can get into a warm minivan with coffee because they don't have what it takes. So when these soldiers were taught, when these potential commandos were taught imagery, they persevered almost to the point where like they would persevere through significant pain because they had the ability to transcend it in their mind to the image of what it would be like to be awarded that honor, and how that would connect them to someone in their family who was a commando, or how that would be a model for their child. So you can even transcend physical pain. Where the mind goes, energy flows, right?
Yeah. And I used to be a long distance runner, so I know the power of I mean, not like professionally, but all through high school, I ran cross country and track, and I continued running for quite a few years after that, but just for fun. But I tried running years after, thinking I'd just fall back into it, not really realizing how much mental toughness I had gained back then and had not been practicing. And man, that first mile especially, it's just like the whole time I'm talking myself into continuing running. And so to be able to tie that to a bigger goal, I don't think I always connected that. And I wonder how that would have changed some of my outcomes. But one of the things that you teach in imagery practice is something called LAP. Teach us about that.
Yeah. So it's LAP is, it's using cues, right? So you locate your cue. And a cue could be anything. It could be touching your heart. It could be touching your wrist. We like to use something that's like, it's not like if you're without it, it's something that you can do at any time. Like take a deep breath could be your cue. Touching a part of your body, tapping something could be your cue. So you locate your cue, you activate your imagery of your desired goal, and then you persevere, or you plan.
I interviewed a hypnotist a long time ago. How to hypnotize yourself to do best things was the name of the episode. But I remember that's one of the things the hypnotist taught was to actually create your own cue. And what I love about that is that So often we're waiting for cues in real life. Like we're waiting for
Yeah.
something to remind us versus consciously creating our own cue to where it's like, and maybe tell me if this is
Yeah,
something
we
that you could
call
do
those
also.
like triggers, right? So the
Yeah,
difference between trigger and a cue. So something can trigger you, but a cue is deliberate. A cue is intentional. You set your cues.
that makes sense. And so then once you set the cue, then you activate your imagery.
Mhm. That's right. And so if you're in the heat of the moment in a match, then you're going to plan your next move. Or if you're a commando, you're going to persevere.
So give an example for somebody that might be doing this for an emotional response that they're trying to retrain. Say it is with their children and or their spouse, and they find themselves overreacting or snapping. So that's the cue to where it's like, okay, well, or they find themselves doing this. So then they create their own cue, like maybe tapping, and then walk us through that.
Yeah, so sure. So it could be like I'm thinking of a particular client where coming home from work, right? And work was super stressful. So they'd often come home and they'd be in that work mode, right? And their kids are little and it's like switching gears is not easy. And this particular client would be prone to lose their temper then. So the doorway to the house became a cue. So that doorway, when she saw, was like, okay, I'm leaving my work like stressors and all those like to-dos and all, and I'm walking into this space with my family. So it's this mental like reset. She sees the cue, she activates her imagery, and then she plans, how do I want this evening to go?
I love that because you can even sort of brace yourself for the things that you know that you're likely to fall into, which we all have those things. And even back to the sugar cravings, it could be after work. You know, you come home and that's when you end up walking to the market next door and buying 3 cookies or whatever it is. And so it's like,
Yeah, no, and again, it's like, okay, a habit, but cues help interrupt the neural pathway of the habit. Like it's just like a reset, like, okay. And it's a reminder. And once you experience the mental contrasting, you realize like, okay, am I gonna go for because the mind likes black and white. Am I gonna go for the pit in my chest or stomach? Or am I gonna go for that light, airy feeling? I get to choose.
so a lot of times when we're thinking about changing our habits and creating new ones, we think of the idea of grit and kind of pushing through. But you share that there is a dark side of that. What do we
Yeah.
need to know?
Well, the people will forget who they are, or they get so single-mindedly focused on a goal. Maybe it's a gold medal in the Olympics. And then after, whether they got it or they didn't get it, they have something called the Olympic blues, right? Which is a real thing. So you lose sight of yourself and you just simply become like on a mission. And maybe things happen along the way. Maybe you lose friendships or you lose touch with family or people important to you because you were so gritty. You persevered so much, or maybe you persevered to a point of losing yourself or realizing that you're climbing up the wrong mountain.
I was listening to a podcast called The Vedic Worldview by Tom Knowles, and he talks about following your charm. And I love this concept because we often set our eyes on a goal and then maybe we get halfway there and it's like, yeah, like you just said, maybe you realize that's not what you actually want, but then you feel like a failure because you're not following through with your goal. And this man was talking about how when you follow your charm, sometimes the universe will lead you to a spot just so that you can see more than you did at your last spot. You have a little bit more perspective here. And so to be okay with pivoting if you feel called to, because maybe that's why you ended up there. Maybe that's why you started following that goal, was just so you could see this other goal that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I think that goes back to your point earlier about not liking the word goal, because with a goal, it's always this thing that's outside of yourself that you're going to accomplish versus who you're becoming. And you can still have goals while you're focusing on that. Like, I want to be an Olympic gold medalist. It's like just a shift rather than I just want to win the 2024 Olympics and whatever. And because that's where the end point is. My friend Kelsey Ramden talks about the success hangover when you do that. And so this way, even after you either reach the goal or you decide you want to pivot, if the whole time you keep bringing it back to who do I want to be through this, then that is still your guiding post, because you didn't really lose anything regardless of altering your choices as you go.
Yes. And also the question that's important to ask as well is, what about after that? Who will you be after that? Or who will you be if that doesn't happen? Because not everyone can be a gold medalist. Who are you and who will you be then? Right? So you can get so single-mindedly focused that you feel if you don't achieve what you set out to achieve, you're a loser, you're a disappointment, you failed. So these conversations are really important. And again, we use the spirit of MI throughout. Well, what happens then? How will you handle that? Because if we wait until that, that experience, they're in the throes of it, then it's really hard. It needs to be a conversation, ideally from the beginning.
What does your daily imagery practice look like?
It's always evolving. I have to tell you, that's a really amazing thing about it. So it begins the minute my feet touch the floor in the morning. And then there's another cue of being in the shower. And then if I feel like, sometimes I'll feel like something rising in my chest and I want to say something that I know I shouldn't say, and then I'll take a deep breath. So it's like really throughout the day. The refrigerator door handle is another one. But I'll be really mindful. I'll set a mindful intention. And like the other day, it can come from a conversation. We did a training the other day, and there was a slide of a runner running in the rain, because it's the number one reason why people don't run is it's cold and rainy outside. So that's an excuse to stay in bed. So we talked about this, and I had that slide in my mind, and I had decided I wanted to start running again. And the following day, when I was getting up for a run, lo and behold, it was raining and it was cold, and I wanted to stay in bed. It was Saturday morning. I thought I had a good work week, worked so hard, I deserve to stay in bed. And then I thought about how good it would feel after the run, in the shower after, and tying into the values of health and making time for myself. And as I set out to run, even then I was like, I'll do a short run. And then I thought of the ocean, how nice it would be when I got there, what the light would be like. So suddenly 10 minutes was 20 minutes, and I found myself at the beach. And then there's a feeling of accomplishment as you run home. So it's like at any point in the day, you can use it to just be like a better version of yourself, to not just react. And certainly I'm not perfect, but it gives a little bit more of a space, we say, between stimulus and response. And these cues just help you, to commit to something, to commit to walking through that doorway and really being present with your kids, to commit to, pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
I have realized that I'm great at this with certain areas. It's like there's little areas of my life I almost feel like I've mastered, and then other ones where it all goes to the wind. So I'm excited to implement it more consciously, because I think I've just learned things along the way from being a runner, from being very athletic my whole life. Like that's one thing. I don't go periods of time without moving my body. I've always been great at that. There's choices with my health that I'm amazing at. And then there's other things that, like becoming a writer today, I can neglect completely. So I love leaving listeners with something to really focus on, something concrete, because yes, it's awesome how we can implement visualizations into every area of our lives, but it might seem like a bigger starting point. So what is one thing that we can do today to start implementing more imagery in our lives?
Yeah. And I wouldn't say, even I don't do it in every area in my life. It would begin to feel oppressive. But with the things that I know that I've set an intention with, I'll use it there. So I wouldn't want people to feel like, oh my God, I have to use this all the time. But it would be like to start small, right? And if they have a goal, to connect it to a value, and then to ask themselves, maybe they use the same cue I use as when your feet touch the floor in the morning. What's one thing I can do, just one thing today, to bring me closer to that? And can I commit to that?
Well,
Keep it small, start small.
Well, thank you for all the research that you've put into this and for bringing some of these things that are known more in the academic worlds to the public because it's so useful. I love how practical and actionable this episode is. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and functional imagery training, where's the best place to connect and find your book?
Oh, sure. Well, they can find the book online. It's called The Choice Point. Our website is imagerycoaching.com. So we do trainings and there's a great community. We say we're building a movement. So you can pre-order the book. We'd love to have you pre-order the book. If you order a certain number of books, then you get like a free coaching session with either John or I. So there's some great incentives right now.
All the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/301. Your challenge for this week is to first set an intention. What's something that's been on your mind that you've wanted to work toward? It doesn't have to be a goal, but it could be. It could also just be a way of being. Maybe you want more patience with your family. Maybe you want to be more generous with everyone. Maybe you just want to feel less anxious and stressed. Or maybe it is a big goal that you've been putting off for a while. Once you have your intentions set, try to incorporate visualization techniques throughout your day. So maybe just when you think about it, you take a deep breath, you close your eyes, and you start to think, what will this feel like when I accomplish this? What should patience and kindness feel like in my body? What would it feel like after I paid for this person's meter? What would it feel like if I let go of the story that keeps circling in my head that's causing anxiety and stress? See if you could bring all of your senses into that version of yourself that you want to be. Since this is a new habit, it might be difficult to remember it throughout the day. We tend to consume things like a podcast episode and then kind of forget about it as we go along. So it might be helpful to set an alarm, maybe 3 times throughout today, maybe 10, however many you feel called to do, and have it remind you to visualize. And then when you hear that little alarm go off, you take a moment and you visualize what you're working towards. Or you can have a trigger or a cue. It could be something that you do while you brush your teeth, while you wash dishes. So let me know how it goes and share some of the ideas that you come up with. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. Don't forget, you can also join the MindLove membership at mindlove.com/membership. There's all sorts of masterclasses, meditations, and other bonuses, including ad-free listening to the MindLove podcast. You can also find my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And if you loved this episode, consider sharing it by taking a screenshot and tagging MindLove Melissa and MindLove Podcast. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with MindLove. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.
No one knows your business better than you. So who better to create your website than, well, you? Wix's Website Builder puts it all in your hands. Create a beautiful website just by talking with AI or choosing from thousands of templates. Customize every detail with simple drag-and-drop tools and get everything you need to start running business your way. Build more, think bigger, and do it all yourself on Wix. Go to Wix.com.